It began with a scream that no one remembered hearing, and a body that no one could forget. The year was 1648, and the colony of Massachusetts Bay was still a fragile dream, a world of candlelight, superstition, and fear. In a land where justice was preached from the pulpit, death was supposed to have meaning. But when Martha Bellamy, a young midwife, was found dead by the edge of the Charles River, the New World learned a dark truth. Even paradise can keep secrets. Her throat had been cut cleanly. Her apron was soaked through, and her small leather satchel, the one she carried on every birth call, was gone. The settlers whispered that the devil himself had taken her. But others whispered a more dangerous thought, that her killer was one of them. What followed would become the first recorded unsolved murder in American history, a case that baffled magistrates, priests, and even time itself. This is the story of America's first cold case. Before I proceed with the story, hit the subscribe button to join the community, and then drop a comment right now telling us what city you're watching from. Let's see how globally this story has traveled. Martha Bellamy wasn't just another colonist. At 28, she was one of the few women trusted to bring life into a world constantly surrounded by death. Her records show that she served as a midwife and healer in the settlement near Cambridge, known then as Newtown. She lived alone, in a small timber cottage by the marsh, a strange thing in a time when unmarried women were viewed with suspicion. Those who knew her said she was quiet but strong, with quick hands and sharper eyes. Children followed her when she visited homes, believing she could speak to angels. But behind her calm smile, she carried the reputation of someone who knew too much. There was Reverend Josiah Crane, the Puritan minister who had once called her a woman too familiar with God's mysteries. And there was Samuel Cook, the mill owner who had accused her of witchcraft only months before her death, after she'd refused his advances. But in 1648, witchcraft was still a word spoken like a knife, and accusation alone could destroy a life. When Martha was found murdered, it wasn't the act of a stranger. It was an execution in disguise. Her body was found at dawn by a fisherman named John Latham, drifting in his small skiff along the riverbank. He told the town constable she looked as though she'd been set down gently, her hands folded over her chest. But the cut across her neck told a different story. In the days that followed, the settlement descended into panic. Murder, in the eyes of the Puritans, wasn't just a crime. It was a sin that threatened the soul of the entire community. The local magistrate, Thomas Danforth, ordered a swift investigation. The evidence was thin but damning in its simplicity. A trail of footprints leading from the river to the mill road. Fragments of torn linen found near the miller's fence, and in the mud beside them, the impression of a man's boot. Danforth gathered the townsfolk in the meeting hall and demanded names. But no one spoke. No one wanted to be the one who accused a neighbor, not when punishment could mean death or banishment. Still, the whispers began. They said Samuel Cook had been seen leaving his mill that night, lantern in hand, that he'd been angry over the gossip spreading about him and Martha, that he'd told the tavern keeper, "If she keeps talking, I'll make her silent for good." But gossip wasn't evidence, and the Puritans were meticulous about sin. Every act had to be proven beyond Scripture. So the case went cold almost immediately. Months turned into years, and Martha's name faded like ink in the rain. The settlers moved on, or pretended to. Her cottage was abandoned, reclaimed by the marshland. But every spring, when the river swelled, locals swore they heard something, a faint knocking like a hand against wood. And sometimes, fishermen claimed they saw her reflection in the water, pale, eyes open, as if still waiting to be found. Nearly a decade later, a group of laborers digging near the mill unearthed a rusted knife and a leather satchel buried beneath a rotted plank. Inside the satchel were several birth records and a letter. The letter was addressed to Reverend Crane. It read simply, "I fear no man's judgment but God's. The truth will rise when the river does." No signature, but the handwriting matched the Reverend's. The discovery was enough to reopen the wound. Rumors exploded that Reverend Crane and Samuel Cook had conspired to silence Martha, one to protect his position, the other his shame. But by then, both men were dead. Crane had taken ill and died in his sleep. Cook had drowned when his skiff capsized in the same river where Martha was found. The townsfolk called it divine justice, but no one ever proved who killed her. Over the next century, Martha Bellamy's murder became a ghost story passed from generation to generation. Children dared each other to visit the old riverbank on moonlit nights. Farmers swore their crops withered if they cut wood from her land. And sailors along the Charles would say her spirit followed them when the fog rolled in thick from the marsh. By the time Boston grew from colony to city, her story was buried in forgotten archives until a Harvard historian named Dr. Eliza Hanford rediscovered the original case record in 1912. Her research revealed the truth about the investigation, that the coroner's notes described the cut on Martha's neck as clean, deliberate, and precise, and that the torn linen found near the mill matched fabric from the minister's study. Hanford's work brought the case back into the public eye, published under the haunting title, The Woman the Colony Forgot. The press called it America's first cold case. And for the first time in 250 years, people began asking again, who killed Martha Bellamy? In 2018, a team of researchers at Boston University digitized colonial records, including the Danforth archive. Among them was a small, water-damaged page that had never been indexed. It was a transcript of the town hearing, the very one where Danforth questioned the villagers. The page contained one sentence that historians had never seen before. It read, "The Reverend did confess that the woman came to him with word of his sin." The implication was staggering. Martha may have known a secret that could ruin Crane, perhaps an affair, an illegitimate child, or even corruption within the church. And for that, she was silenced. But because her killer's identity was never recorded, the case remains open, officially unsolved, even now. More than 3 centuries later, Martha's story is not just a mystery, it's a warning. The first recorded murder in America wasn't solved not because there was no evidence, but because no one wanted to face the truth. In every town, in every age, silence is its own kind of killer. When we remember her, the midwife who brought life into a new world, we also remember that the foundations of justice were written not in law, but in fear. The river that carried her body away still runs through Cambridge today. And on quiet mornings, when the fog clings low and the water moves without a ripple, locals say they still hear her words. The truth will rise when the river does. This was Trace Crime Files. Subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger than fiction, and justice is never as simple as it seems.